I'm not sitting next to someone who clearly doesn't belong here. That ticket must be fraudulent." Vanessa Mitchell's venomous words sliced through the first-class cabin like shattered glass, deliberately loud enough for every passenger to hear. Her manicured finger pointed accusingly at Gabrielle Kennedy, who stood calmly in the aisle beside seat 1A, her assigned seat. "Mom, this is my designated seat." 1A. Gabrielle replied, her voice measured and even. She held up her boarding pass, the premium cardstock unmistakable. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a smirk that dripped with contempt. "Don't lie to me. I know a scammer when I see one." Her voice climbed higher, ensuring maximum audience. "You probably printed that fake ticket at home thinking you could steal from people who work for what they have." Gabrielle remained perfectly still, her leather briefcase steady in her grip despite the public assault on her dignity. The monogrammed gold initials GK caught the light as she maintained her composure. "Everyone see this?" Vanessa announced to the cabin fraud, "happening right before your eyes. Someone call security before she tries something else." The irony hung in the air, thick and unacknowledged. Vanessa Mitchell was shrieking at the woman who built this airline from nothing. The woman whose vision, determination, and 14 years of relentless work had created every detail of this aircraft, down to the very seat Vanessa now claimed as her exclusive domain. Have you ever watched someone's prejudice transform into their own undoing? Have you witnessed the precise moment when assumptions collapse, leaving nothing but the hollow echo of misplaced certainty? 3 hours earlier, a black sedan had glided to a stop at Denver International Airport's departures curb. The morning sun caught the polished surfaces of the terminal as travelers hurried past with rolling luggage and steaming coffee cups in the crisp mountain air. No one paid particular attention to the woman who stepped onto the sidewalk, and that's exactly how Gabrielle Kennedy preferred it on days like today. The black sedan pulled smoothly to the curb at Denver International Airport's departure level. Morning sunlight glinted off the terminal's distinctive white peaks as Gabrielle Kennedy stepped onto the sidewalk. Her navy business suit contrasted against the bright Colorado day, immaculate despite the early hour. The leather briefcase in her hand caught the light gold monogrammed initials GK briefly flashing as she moved with purpose toward the sliding glass doors. Her movements flowed with quiet confidence, every step deliberate, assured belonging. This wasn't just another airport to Gabrielle. This was the physical manifestation of her vision, the starting point of her journey. "Good morning, Miss Kennedy," whispered a young baggage handler who recognized her. She smiled and nodded warmly but continued walking. Today wasn't about being the CEO. It was about experiencing her airline as her passengers did. 14 years ago, she had stood on this same curb, clutching nothing but a business plan and unshakable determination. Back then, she was just another aspiring entrepreneur with an improbable dream, a young black woman from Chicago's South Side proposing to start an airline. The memories surfaced vividly as she passed through the automatic doors. An airline Lawrence Whitfield had laughed, not bothering to hide his amusement as he slid her business plan back across the polished boardroom table. "Ms. Kennedy, do you have any idea of the capital requirements? The regulatory hurdles, the connections needed?" The investment banker hadn't bothered reading past the executive summary. His eyes had assessed her dark skin, her feminine features, her youth, and determined she wasn't worth serious consideration. Even established airlines struggled to maintain profitability. Another investor had told her more kindly, though no less dismissively. "This isn't a suitable venture for someone with your background." Her background. The words had stung because she knew exactly what they meant. Not her education at Northwestern, not her MBA, not her 5 years in aviation logistics. They meant her skin color, her gender, the assumptions made about both. Aviation is an old boys network, the only female investor in another pitch meeting had told her, afterward voice lowered. "They'll never let you in. Choose another industry." But Gabrielle hadn't built her life by accepting other people's limitations. Every rejection had simply refined her approach, strengthened her resolve. She'd started smaller, securing funding for a regional charter service focusing on underserved routes. Success there led to expanded service. Strategic partnerships followed. Careful growth. Reinvestment. Now, Air Vista Airlines operated from 46 cities with a fleet that rivaled legacy carriers who once dismissed her as a naive dreamer. The white and teal planes with their distinctive rising sun logo had become recognized symbols of exceptional service and innovative management. Industry publications that once ignored her now featured her regularly. Her phone buzzed with a text from James Rivera. Her COO Atlanta merger meeting confirmed for 2 p.m. Board chair arriving early to discuss final terms. This deal changes everything. Gabrielle allowed herself a small smile. The merger would triple Air Vista's route network overnight, finally positioning her airline as a major national carrier. More importantly, it validated every person who believed in her vision when others saw only impossible dreams. Near gate B7, Gabrielle noticed an elderly man studying the departure screens with evident confusion, his weathered face creased with concern. Without hesitation, she approached him. "Excuse me, sir. Can I help you find your gate?" The man's face brightened with relief. "Oh, thank you, dear. I'm looking for the flight to Albuquerque, but these signs are so confusing. That would be gate C15. It's in the next concourse. Would you like me to show you the way if it's not too much trouble?" My eyes aren't what they used to be. Gabrielle personally escorted him to the correct terminal, ignoring curious glances from other travelers who occasionally recognized her. This hands-on approach had built Air Vista's reputation. A CEO who remembered that airlines exist to serve people, not just generate profits. "Have a wonderful flight, Mr. Thompson," she said, noting his name from his boarding pass as they reached his gate. "Such a kind young lady," he responded, patting her hand. "You don't see service like this anymore?" Walking toward her own gate, Gabrielle passed a janitor mopping near the food court. "Good morning, Carlos. How did Eliana's science competition go?" Carlos beamed with paternal pride. "She won first place Ms. Kennedy full scholarship to the summer program at Colorado State." "That's wonderful. Tell her I'm proud of her. And remind her our internship program will be waiting when she graduates." These connections mattered to Gabrielle. She had learned every employee's name during Air Vista's early days when the entire company fit in a single office suite. Growth hadn't changed her belief that success means lifting others alongside you. Her own rise from rejection to industry leadership had taught her that genuine connection was not just good humanity, it was good business. The terminal hummed around her, the controlled chaos of thousands of individual journeys intersecting briefly before continuing in their separate directions. Gabrielle observed everything: the cleanliness of floors, the efficiency of check-in counters, the friendliness of staff interactions. Mental notes accumulated. Details mattered. Her assistant called with an update. "The discrimination complaints from Phoenix and Denver routes are getting worse," Tanya reported. Passengers reporting hostile treatment from ground service staff at both locations, similar patterns to what we saw in Dallas last month. Gabrielle's jaw tightened. These incidents represented her worst fear, that Air Vista's success might breed resentment from competitors' employees or contractors who handled their ground operations. She'd been investigating personally flying incognito to experience the service her customers received. "He'll handle it personally," she told Tanya. "Book me on flights through both cities next week. I want to see exactly what's happening." Today's Atlanta trip served the same purpose. Rather than using the executive boarding process reserved for airline CEOs, direct car service to aircraft bypassing terminals entirely, Gabrielle chose the regular passenger experience. She wanted authentic feedback even if it meant dealing with occasional inconveniences. This approach had built Air Vista from concept to reality. It would protect what she'd created. No matter how large the airline grew, Gabrielle Kennedy never forgot the most important perspective: the passengers. Gabrielle settled into a seat at Gate B-23, observing the pre-boarding process for Air Vista's flight to Atlanta. Her presence went unnoticed among the business travelers and vacationers exactly as she intended. She opened her tablet, reviewing the quarterly passenger satisfaction scores that had recently come across her desk. The numbers showed excellence in most categories: cleanliness, on-time performance, baggage handling, in-flight service. But customer experience scores at certain airports had slipped. Phoenix, Denver, and most recently Dallas showed troubling patterns in how passengers were treated during boarding and deplaning. The complaints came disproportionately from minority passengers. Gabrielle's leadership philosophy had always centered on personal verification. Early in Air Vista's history, when a passenger had complained about uncomfortable seating, Gabrielle had flown that route herself, sitting in every section. The resulting redesign had earned industry recognition for passenger comfort. Metrics matter, but experience tells the truth, she often reminded her executive team. This hands-on approach sometimes confused industry veterans used to leadership that remained isolated in corporate headquarters, but the results spoke for themselves. Air Vista consistently ranked highest in passenger satisfaction among mid-sized carriers. Today's journey served dual purposes. Beyond her scheduled merger meeting in Atlanta, Gabrielle would experience firsthand how passengers were treated at both Denver and Atlanta airports, gathering insights no report could capture. Her phone vibrated with an incoming call from James Rivera. "James," she answered. "How are the preparations coming along?" "Everything's set for the meeting," her COO replied. "The final valuation came in even higher than we projected. Sunbelt's board is unanimous. They want this merger to happen quickly. The Atlanta deal represented the culmination of Gabrielle's long-term strategy. Sunbelt Airlines had strong market share throughout the Southeast and Caribbean, regions where Air Vista currently had limited presence. Their management culture aligned well with Air Vista's people-first approach. Most importantly, the combined route network would create a true national carrier capable of competing with the industry giants. "What's your read on their executive team?" Gabrielle asked, watching a family with young children navigate the terminal. "Any concerns about cultural integration?" "Their CEO is fully on board," James assured her. "He's been transparent about wanting to step back toward retirement. A few of their VPs seem nervous, but that's expected. The ground staff seems excited. They've heard good things about how we treat employees." 14 years of building Air Vista had taught Gabrielle that mergers failed or succeeded based on people, not just numbers. Balance sheets could be reconciled far more easily than clashing cultures or threatened egos. Good. Remind everyone that we're preserving jobs, not cutting them. We need their institutional knowledge as much as they need our growth trajectory. Will do. The car will meet you at Atlanta Hartsfield. Legal team will be standing by if we need any last-minute adjustments to the terms. Gabrielle ended the call, her mind already mapping contingencies. This merger would triple Air Vista's route network, adding 87 new destinations overnight. The combined company would employ over 300 people. A far cry from the 26 employees who had launched the airline from a single gate at Denver International. Success had never made Gabrielle complacent. She remembered too vividly the early struggles, the skepticism, the closed doors. Even now, with Air Vista's demonstrated success, she occasionally encountered the raised eyebrows, the surprised tone when meeting new industry contacts who hadn't expected the founder and CEO to be a black woman. Her phone rang again. This time it was Tanya Rodriguez, her executive assistant. "Ms. Kennedy, I've finalized your return arrangements for tomorrow evening." The executive team asked again why you're flying commercial instead of taking the company jet. Gabrielle smiled. "Tell them what I always say, that you can't understand the customer experience if you don't have the customer experience," Tanya recited. "I did. They still think it's unnecessary with such a critical meeting on the schedule." "That's exactly when it's most necessary," Gabrielle replied. Success makes it easy to become isolated. I never want to lose touch with what our passengers experience. I've booked you through Phoenix on the return as you requested. Regular boarding economy class. The team there won't know you're coming. Perfect. Any updates on the Dallas situation? The investigation is ongoing. Initial reports suggest the contracted ground staff supervisor has been making boarding difficult for certain passengers. We're gathering more evidence before confronting the contractor. Gabrielle frowned. Accelerate that timeline. I want this resolved before it escalates further. If necessary, bring those operations in-house. As Gabrielle ended the call, her attention was drawn to a commotion near the customer service desk. A woman in designer clothing stood berating a gate agent, her voice carrying across the waiting area. This is absolutely unacceptable. Do you have any idea who I am? I should be pre-boarded immediately. The woman's cream-colored suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her jewelry glinted under the terminal lights. Tasteful, but expensive. Her blonde hair was professionally styled, her makeup flawless. Everything about her projected wealth and entitlement. The gate agent maintained professional composure. I understand your frustration, Mom, but pre-boarding is reserved for passengers with disabilities and those needing special assistance. First class will begin boarding momentarily. I have spent over $30,000 with airlines this quarter alone. I'm not accustomed to waiting with everyone else. The woman's voice projected deliberately, ensuring others heard her importance. This is precisely why I prefer private aviation. The service standards in commercial flights have become abysmal. Gabrielle observed quietly, noting how her gate agent handled the situation. The woman, Vanessa Mitchell, Gabrielle would later learn, continued her performance, clearly playing to the audience of waiting passengers. He'll be speaking directly to your management about this treatment. My company handles ground operations for half the airlines in this country. We can influence passenger volumes significantly. The implied threat hung in the air, but the gate agent remained unfazed. I apologize for any inconvenience, but our boarding procedures apply to all passengers. First class will begin boarding in approximately 2 minutes. Vanessa huffed dramatically and turned away, her eyes scanning the gate area as if seeking allies in her indignation. Her gaze briefly passed over Gabrielle, dismissing her without recognition or interest. Gabrielle made a mental note to commend the gate agent later for maintaining professional standards despite pressure. This was exactly the kind of real-time observation that reports and metrics couldn't capture, the human element of airline operations that ultimately defined the passenger experience. Little did she know that this brief glimpse of Vanessa Mitchell was merely the prelude to a confrontation that would test everything Gabrielle had built. Air Vista Airlines Flight 447 with service to Atlanta is now ready for boarding. We invite our passengers needing special assistance and families with young children to board at this time. The boarding announcement crackled over the PA system as Gabrielle observed the process from her seat near the gate. She watched how the gate agents interacted with each passenger. The eye contact, the greeting, the efficiency of scanning boarding passes. She noted the cleanliness of the boarding area, the organization of the queuing system, the clarity of announcements. These details might seem insignificant to casual travelers, but Gabrielle knew they formed the foundation of the passenger experience. The scent of the jet bridge, clean but with hints of jet fuel, the temperature slightly cool to offset the coming heat of the aircraft. The lighting bright enough for safety without being harsh. Everything contributed to a passenger's first impression of Air Vista. After families and those needing assistance boarded the gate, Agent made the next announcement. We now invite our Air Vista Premium and First Class passengers to board at their convenience. Vanessa Mitchell surged forward immediately, pushing past another first-class passenger who had been standing closer to the boarding lane. Her movement was aggressive, territorial, her Hermes bag swinging dramatically as she presented her boarding pass with theatrical flourish. Finally, she declared loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. Some recognition for those of us who make this airline profitable. The gate agent maintained her professional smile while scanning Vanessa's boarding pass. "Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. You're in seat 1B. Enjoy your flight." Gabrielle waited her turn, observing how other premium passengers were treated. When she approached the podium, the same gate agent greeted her with identical professionalism. No recognition, exactly as Gabrielle preferred when traveling incognito. "Good morning. Boarding pass, please." Gabrielle presented her mobile boarding pass. The scanner beeped confirmation. "Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. You're in seat 1A. Enjoy your flight to Atlanta." As Gabrielle moved toward the jet bridge, she noticed Vanessa's head whip around at the sound of another first-class passenger boarding right behind her. Vanessa paused deliberately, creating a bottleneck in the jet bridge entrance. "Are you sure you're in the right boarding group?" Vanessa asked with saccharine sweetness. Her voice pitched loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Economy boarding hasn't started yet." Gabrielle met Vanessa's gaze calmly. "I have a first-class seat, thank you." Vanessa's eyes narrowed as she examined Gabrielle from head to toe, taking in the professional attire and confident demeanor with obvious skepticism. "Well, I suppose anything's possible these days. Airlines have certainly lowered their standards." The implication hung in the air, thick and unmistakable. Vanessa hadn't explicitly mentioned race, but the subtext was clear to everyone within earshot. A few passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. The gate agent's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Gabrielle simply nodded and gestured toward the jet bridge. "After you." The jet bridge felt smaller with Vanessa's aggressive energy filling the space. She walked slowly, deliberately, blocking the path while making a show of checking her phone and muttering just loudly enough to be heard. "I just can't believe how this industry has declined. There was a time when first class meant something, when certain standards were maintained." A young white man in a business suit behind Gabrielle rolled his eyes, clearly embarrassed by Vanessa's behavior. He caught Gabrielle's glance and offered an apologetic smile, which she returned with a slight nod. These small moments of human connection had always given Gabrielle hope, the silent acknowledgement that not everyone shared such prejudices. As they approached the aircraft door, flight attendant Miguel Fuentes greeted passengers with a warm smile. "Good morning. Welcome aboard Air Vista Flight 447 to Atlanta." Vanessa barely acknowledged him, brushing past to enter the cabin. Gabrielle, however, responded with equal warmth. "Good morning. Thank you." The first-class cabin gleamed with the recent refreshment Gabrielle had personally overseen 6 months earlier. The leather seats, a soft cream color with teal accents matching Air Vista's branding, were arranged in a 1-2 configuration. Privacy partitions of polished wood veneer separated each seat without creating isolation. The overall effect was one of openness combined with exclusivity. Vanessa had already reached row 1 and was arranging her belongings in the overhead compartment with exaggerated care. Her seat 1B was directly adjacent to Gabrielle's assigned seat 1A. As Gabrielle approached, Vanessa's body language shifted subtly. A stiffening of her shoulders, a slight angling of her body to take up more space. The message was clear: this was her territory, and intruders weren't welcome. Gabrielle reached row 1 and gestured politely. "Excuse me, I need to get to my seat." Vanessa didn't move immediately. Instead, she looked directly at Gabrielle's boarding pass, which was still visible on her phone screen. 1A. There must be some mistake. That's a premium seat? There's no mistake, Gabrielle replied evenly. That's my assigned seat. But how did you... Vanessa caught herself, apparently realizing how the question would sound. She pivoted. Those seats are typically reserved for our highest-tier frequent flyers. The use of our implied ownership association with the airline that she didn't actually have. I'm familiar with the allocation system, Gabrielle said simply. She remained standing calm but unmovable. A senior flight attendant named Sandra Wilson approached her experienced eyes, quickly assessing the situation. "Is everything all right here?" "Everything's fine," Gabrielle assured her. "I'm just getting to my seat." "Her seat," Vanessa corrected with emphasis. "She claims to have been assigned 1A. Sandra glanced at Gabrielle's boarding pass. "Yes, that's correct. 1A is your assigned seat, ma'am." She stepped back to allow Gabrielle to pass. Vanessa reluctantly shifted, making a show of reorganizing her belongings to allow Gabrielle the absolute minimum space to access her seat. As Gabrielle settled in, Vanessa immediately repositioned her magazines and tablet to encroach on the armrest between them. The message was clear. Vanessa Mitchell might be forced to sit beside Gabrielle Kennedy, but she would ensure that Gabrielle knew exactly how unwelcome her presence was. Neither woman realized yet how dramatically their confrontation would escalate, or how completely the power dynamic between them would soon be reversed. "Excuse me, but you've put your bag in my overhead space." Vanessa's voice cut through the ambient sounds of boarding, deliberately loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. She pointed at Gabrielle's leather briefcase, which had been placed in the compartment above their seats. Gabrielle looked up from her phone. "The space is shared by both our seats. My bag is compact and leaves plenty of room for your items." "That's not how it works," Vanessa insisted, standing to reposition Gabrielle's briefcase, pushing it roughly to the side. "Premium passengers like myself are allocated priority space. Your things should go further back." The implication was clear. Vanessa didn't consider Gabrielle a legitimate premium passenger. A younger flight attendant noticed the interaction and approached tentatively. "Can I help with anything?" he asked. "Yes," Vanessa said immediately. "Please explain to this woman that first-class overhead compartments are for first-class passengers' luggage. She is a first-class passenger." "Mom," the flight attendant replied quietly. "Both of you are welcome to use the overhead space." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Well, she should have been more considerate about leaving room for others. Some people think they can just push their way into spaces where they don't belong. The double meaning hung in the air. Gabrielle maintained her composure, though she noticed several passengers within earshot shifting uncomfortably. A woman across the aisle glanced up from her book, eyes widening slightly at Vanessa's tone. "I believe there's sufficient room for everyone's belongings," Gabrielle said calmly. "If you'd like, I can help rearrange things to make more space." "I don't need your help," Vanessa snapped. She turned to the flight attendant. "Instead of standing there, maybe you could offer me a pre-departure beverage. That is still part of premium service, isn't it?" "Of course, ma'am." "Well, begin beverage service momentarily." As boarding continued, Vanessa maintained a steady stream of comments, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. She complained about the declining standards of air travel, the interesting choices airlines were making with their passenger allocations, and how she normally traveled by private jet. Gabrielle focused on her phone, reviewing notes for her Atlanta meeting, but she was acutely aware of the tension building beside her. Years of navigating professional environments had taught her when to engage and when to simply observe. This moment called for observation. Miguel Fuentes, the head flight attendant, began the premium cabin beverage service. "Good morning. Would either of you care for a pre-departure beverage? We have champagne orange juice or water available." "Champagne, obviously," Vanessa replied without looking up from her magazine. "Proper champagne, not Prosecco. I can tell the difference." "And for you, Mom?" Miguel asked Gabrielle. "Water would be perfect, thank you." Vanessa made a small dismissive sound. "Water. How exciting." When Miguel returned with their drinks, Vanessa immediately questioned the champagne. "This isn't the brand you normally serve in first class. I fly frequently and I know what you usually offer." "This is our standard premium champagne," Mom Miguel explained politely. "Well, standards have clearly slipped," Vanessa muttered, just loud enough for Gabrielle to hear. Much like the passenger screening process. As the final boarding announcements were made, a young black woman named Jordan Lewis settled into seat 2A, directly behind Gabrielle. Jordan was in her mid-20s, dressed in a smart business casual outfit, likely traveling for work. She smiled briefly at Gabrielle as she took her seat, a small gesture of acknowledgement. This subtle interaction seemed to irritate Vanessa further. She shifted in her seat, creating more distance between herself and Gabrielle, then raised her voice again. "Excuse me, flight attendant. Could you check if there are any other available seats in first class? Perhaps next to someone more compatible with my usual travel experience?" Miguel's professional demeanor remained intact, though his eyes betrayed a hint of discomfort. "I'm sorry, Mom, but our first-class cabin is fully booked today. Everyone has assigned seating." "I see." Vanessa's gaze slid toward Gabrielle, then back to Miguel. "And there's no way to verify if everyone in this section has legitimate first-class tickets." The implication was unmistakable. Jordan, who could clearly hear the conversation from her seat, looked up sharply. Other passengers exchanged glances. "All passengers in this cabin have valid first-class boarding passes," Mom Miguel replied firmly. "In my experience," Vanessa pressed on, "sometimes mistakes happen with seat allocations, or boarding passes can be manipulated." Gabrielle finally turned to face Vanessa directly. "Is there a specific concern you'd like to address with me directly?" Vanessa seemed momentarily taken aback by the direct confrontation. She recovered quickly, her voice taking on a faux concerned tone. "I'm simply ensuring that everyone is in their proper place. First class has certain standards that should be maintained, and you believe I don't meet those standards." Gabrielle's question was calm but direct. I didn't say that Vanessa replied, though her expression said otherwise. "But it is unusual to see someone like you in seat 1A. Those are typically reserved for frequent business travelers." "Someone like me," Gabrielle repeated, letting the phrase hang in the air. A few rows back, a passenger had begun recording the interaction discreetly with his phone. Jordan, behind them, had also taken out her phone, angling it to capture what was happening. Vanessa's voice took on a defensive edge. "Don't put words in my mouth. I simply mean someone who doesn't appear to be a regular premium traveler. Your water order, your casual attire. These aren't typical of first-class passengers." "I see," Gabrielle said. "And you've determined this based on what evidence exactly?" Experience Vanessa shot back. "I work with Ground Operations Solutions. We handle operations for multiple major airlines. I know what belongs in first class." "Interesting." Gabrielle turned slightly toward the window, a clear indication she considered the conversation finished. This dismissal seemed to infuriate Vanessa more than any argument could have. As the safety demonstration began, she leaned toward Gabrielle and lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "I don't know how you got this seat. Upgrade, standby, whatever. But people like you are ruining the premium experience for legitimate business travelers who actually pay for these seats." Jordan, who could clearly hear every word, inhaled sharply. The passenger recording from a few rows back adjusted his angle to better capture the escalating situation. Miguel, passing by to check that seats were in upright positions for takeoff, paused as he noticed the tension. "Is everything all right here?" "Actually, no," Vanessa said loudly. "I'd like to speak to the captain before we take off. I have serious concerns about the passenger manifest in first class." The cabin fell suddenly quiet as other conversations stopped. All eyes turned toward row 1. "What specific concerns do you have, Mom Miguel?" asked, his professional tone now edged with caution. "I believe there may be passengers in first class who don't belong here," Vanessa declared, gesturing toward Gabrielle without directly pointing. "As someone who works in airline operations, I consider this a security matter that should be addressed before takeoff." Gabrielle finally turned back to face Vanessa fully. "Would you like to see my boarding pass again? Or perhaps my ID? What exactly would convince you that I belong in this seat?" The confrontation had reached a critical point. Miguel glanced between the two women, clearly trying to determine the best approach to defuse the situation without causing further disruption. "Perhaps I should get the captain," he said finally, his voice betraying his discomfort with the escalating situation. "Yes, you should," Vanessa agreed emphatically. "This is exactly the kind of situation that requires proper authority." As Miguel stepped away to contact the cockpit, Jordan leaned forward slightly. "Excuse me," she said, addressing both women but looking particularly at Gabrielle. "I'm recording this interaction, just so everyone's aware." Vanessa's head whipped around. "That's an invasion of privacy." "You have no right." "Actually," Jordan interrupted calmly, "we're in a public space on a commercial aircraft. There's no expectation of privacy, especially during a potential security concern that you yourself raised." Other passengers had begun to murmur among themselves. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had transformed from the usual pre-departure calm to a tense, charged environment where everyone was suddenly involved in the unfolding drama. The confrontation that had begun as thinly veiled microaggressions was now escalating into something much more public and explicit. And as the captain was being summoned, no one, not Vanessa Mitchell with her supposed industry connections, not the uncomfortable passengers witnessing the exchange, not even the flight crew trying to maintain order, realized that they were participating in a moment that would soon transform Air Vista Airlines forever. "This delay is completely unnecessary," Vanessa declared, checking her watch with exaggerated impatience. "My company handles ground operations for half the airlines at major hubs. One phone call from me can create serious problems for this carrier." The threat hung in the air as Miguel returned from communicating with the cockpit. His expression remained professionally neutral, but tension showed around his eyes. "The captain has been informed of the situation," he said, "is asking if there's a specific security concern or if this is a seating preference issue." Both, Vanessa insisted. "I have reason to believe some passengers may have obtained first-class access inappropriately. As someone who works in airline security-adjacent operations, I consider this a potential protocol breach." Gabrielle observed this performance with practiced calm, though internally she was calculating the impact of this disruption on the flight schedule and the discomfort of her other passengers. Years of facing similar assumptions had prepared her for moments like this. Moments when her presence in spaces of privilege was questioned simply because of her appearance. She could end this immediately by revealing her identity. A simple introduction, Gabrielle Kennedy, CEO of Air Vista Airlines, would transform the entire dynamic. But experience had taught her the value of these unfiltered moments. They revealed truths about her airline's operations that would otherwise remain hidden behind the deference her title normally commanded. Jordan Lewis continued recording discreetly from seat 2A, her phone capturing the escalating confrontation. Other passengers watched with expressions ranging from discomfort to outright disapproval of Vanessa's behavior. Ms. Mitchell-Miguel said, his voice low but firm. "Could you clarify what specific evidence suggests improper access to first class?" "All passengers have been verified at the gate." "Look at her," Vanessa hissed, not bothering to lower her voice. "Does she look like someone who belongs in seat 1A? The most premium seat on this aircraft. No designer bag. No executive appearance, drinking water instead of champagne. Use your eyes." A ripple of murmurs passed through the cabin. A businessman in 3C shook his head in visible disgust at Vanessa's comments. Miguel's professional facade momentarily cracked, revealing genuine discomfort. "Ma'am, we don't evaluate passengers based on appearance. Everyone in this cabin has a valid first-class ticket. Then check her ID against the manifest," Vanessa demanded. "I want verification that she's the actual person named on that boarding pass." Gabrielle, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke. Her voice was measured, controlled, but carried natural authority that made everyone listen. I understand your concern for proper procedure, she said to Miguel, deliberately ignoring Vanessa. I'm happy to show my ID again if it will resolve this situation and prevent further delay for all passengers. She reached for her wallet, but Vanessa's hand suddenly shot out, grabbing Gabrielle's wrist. Don't let her access her bag, Vanessa said urgently. She could be destroying evidence of fraud. The physical contact crossed a crucial boundary. Audible gasps emerged from several passengers. Jordan's phone captured the moment clearly. Miguel stepped forward immediately. Ma'am, you cannot touch another passenger, he said firmly to Vanessa. Please remove your hand immediately. Vanessa released Gabrielle's wrist, but continued her performance. I'm trying to protect this airline from fraud. You should be thanking me. Gabrielle rubbed her wrist slightly where Vanessa had grabbed her. The touch hadn't been painful, but the violation of personal space was significant. She maintained her composure, even as her mind calculated the growing operational impact of this delay. Every minute the aircraft remained at the gate affected connection times, crew hours, and subsequent flights. Perhaps we should continue this conversation with the captain, she suggested calmly. That would be the proper protocol. I agree, Vanessa said triumphantly, misinterpreting Gabrielle's suggestion as capitulation. Miguel nodded and stepped away to communicate with the cockpit again. In his absence, the tension in the cabin intensified. Passengers exchanged glances, some looking away uncomfortably, others watching with undisguised interest. A middle-aged Hispanic woman in seat 3A leaned forward. Excuse me, she said, addressing Vanessa directly. I'm Lucia Hernandez, an attorney. What you're doing could potentially be construed as harassment based on racial profiling. I'd strongly advise you to reconsider your approach. Vanessa's face flushed with anger. How dare you? This has nothing to do with race. This is about maintaining standards and security protocols. Then perhaps you could explain what specific standards you're referring to, Lucia pressed. Because from where I am sitting, you've targeted this woman solely based on her appearance. Other passengers began to murmur in agreement. The social dynamics of the cabin were shifting, with more people openly disapproving of Vanessa's behavior. Sensing her position weakening, Vanessa changed tactics. You don't understand. I work with airlines. I know their processes. Something isn't right here, and I'm trying to protect everyone's safety. By physically grabbing another passenger, Jordan interjected from behind. That doesn't seem very professional for someone in airline operations. Vanessa turned, her expression darkening when she realized Jordan was still recording. Stop filming me immediately. That's a violation of my privacy rights. Actually, a male passenger called from across the aisle. She's right. There's no expectation of privacy on a commercial flight, especially during a conflict you initiated. The mounting social pressure seemed to intensify Vanessa's determination. She turned back to Gabrielle, who had maintained her composed silence throughout the exchange. You haven't said much in your own defense. Vanessa noted, her voice taking on a triumphant edge. Is that because you know I'm right? That you've somehow manipulated your way into a seat you didn't properly pay for? Gabrielle met her gaze directly. I haven't defended myself because there's nothing to defend. I have a valid ticket for seat 1A. Your assumptions about who belongs in this seat say more about you than about me. The simple dignity of this response seemed to land heavily with other passengers, several of whom nodded in agreement. Miguel returned, accompanied by Captain Thomas Bennett. The captain, a tall white man in his 50s with graying temples and a composed demeanor, surveyed the situation with experienced eyes. Good morning, he said, addressing both women but focusing primarily on Vanessa, whom Miguel had identified as the instigator. I understand there's a concern about seating arrangements? Yes, Vanessa began, immediately straightening her posture to project authority. As I explained to your flight attendant, I have reason to believe there may be improper access to first class. As someone who works closely with airline operations, I consider this a security matter that should be addressed before takeoff. Captain Bennett nodded professionally. I appreciate your concern for security. Could you elaborate on the specific evidence that prompted this concern? Vanessa hesitated, suddenly aware that explicitly stating her actual reasons might not reflect well on her. It's a matter of passenger verification. Some individuals don't match the typical profile of first-class travelers, I see, the captain said carefully, and this concern is based on what specific observations, professional experience, Vanessa replied, her voice taking on a defensive edge. I can identify patterns and anomalies in passenger placement. Captain Bennett turned to Gabrielle. Ma'am, I apologize for the disruption. May I see your boarding pass? Gabrielle calmly displayed her mobile boarding pass. Seat 1A is assigned. The captain nodded. Everything appears to be in order. All passengers with valid tickets are entitled to their assigned seats regardless of appearance or travel preferences. But Vanessa began. Unless there's a specific safety concern you can articulate? Captain Bennett continued firmly. I must ask that we resolve this situation immediately. We're already delayed, and this is affecting our departure slot. Vanessa, sensing her authority being undermined, made a final, desperate attempt. Check her ID against the passenger manifest. I believe there may be identity fraud occurring. The captain's expression remained neutral, but his tone cooled noticeably. Mom, we verify identifications at security and at boarding. Unless you have specific evidence of wrongdoing, we cannot subject passengers to repeated identity checks based on personal suspicions. I'm trying to protect your airline, Vanessa insisted, her voice rising. My company could terminate our contract with you over security protocol failures like this. The implied threat caused Miguel to exchange a concerned glance with the captain. Ground Operations Solutions was indeed a significant contractor for many airlines, though not actually for Air Vista, which prided itself on maintaining in-house operations at most locations. This momentary hesitation was all Vanessa needed. She seized on their apparent uncertainty, her confidence surging back. Perhaps you'd prefer I call our mutual contacts at the Aviation Authority, she suggested with false sweetness. I'm sure they'd be very interested in how passenger verification is being handled here. The dramatic escalation had transformed what began as thinly veiled prejudice into something much more dangerous. An explicit challenge that threatened to delay an entire aircraft and potentially damage Air Vista's reputation through false accusations. The moment had arrived for Gabrielle to make a critical decision: continue observing incognito and allow the situation to potentially spiral further, or reveal her identity and end the confrontation immediately. As she weighed her options, the aircraft door reopened. Sandra Wilson, the senior flight attendant who had briefly interacted with them earlier, stepped back into the cabin. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in the scene. The captain, Miguel, and the two women in row 1 surrounded by attentive passengers. When Sandra's gaze settled on Gabrielle, something shifted in her expression. A flash of recognition quickly masked by professional neutrality. She had worked for Air Vista for over a decade, since the early days when Gabrielle had personally hired the first flight crews. Sandra approached quietly, leaned toward Captain Bennett, and whispered something in his ear. The captain's expression changed immediately, surprise followed by careful recalibration of his entire demeanor. He straightened, looking at Gabrielle with new understanding, then back to Vanessa with an expression that had transformed from diplomatic neutrality to barely concealed disapproval. The dynamic in the cabin was about to change dramatically. Captain Bennett. I'm still waiting for a resolution to this situation, Vanessa declared, misinterpreting his momentary silence. Either verify this passenger's identity properly, or find her alternative seating. The captain's demeanor had shifted subtly but significantly after Sandra's whispered information. He glanced at Gabrielle with a new awareness before addressing Vanessa. Ms. Mitchell, all passengers have been properly verified through our standard protocols. Everyone is seated according to their valid boarding pass. That's not good enough, Vanessa insisted, her voice rising. As someone with extensive airline operations experience, I'm telling you that additional verification is necessary in suspicious circumstances. Captain Bennett maintained his professional tone, though his posture had straightened almost imperceptibly. What specific evidence of suspicious circumstances are you referring to beyond your personal impression of who belongs in first class? The directness of the question seemed to momentarily fluster Vanessa. It's a matter of pattern recognition based on industry experience. Something doesn't fit the passenger profile. Several passengers exchanged knowing glances, the subtext of Vanessa's objections becoming increasingly transparent. "I've been flying first class for 20 years. A gray-haired man in 2C commented loudly enough to be heard. There is no profile except having a valid ticket." Vanessa flushed, but pressed on. "Look, I'm trying to help your airline maintain its standards. My company handles ground operations for multiple carriers. Our contract explicitly includes security protocols. This declaration, meant to leverage her presumed authority, had an unexpected effect." Miguel and Sandra exchanged a quick glance of confusion. Air Vista was known throughout the industry for handling its own ground operations at most locations, part of Gabrielle Kennedy's commitment to maintaining direct control over the passenger experience. "Ms. Mitchell," Captain Bennett said carefully, "perhaps you could clarify which company you represent and what specific relationship it has with Air Vista Airlines Ground Operations Solutions," she replied with a hint of condescension. "We're the largest third-party aviation services provider in the country. We handle everything from check-in to baggage for dozens of airlines." Sandra's expression reflected polite skepticism. "I've been with Air Vista for 12 years, and I'm not familiar with that partnership at any of our hubs. We have numerous subsidiary brands," Vanessa said dismissively. "You wouldn't necessarily know the corporate structure. The point is, I understand airline operations better than anyone on this aircraft, and I'm telling you there's a protocol issue that needs addressing." Captain Bennett cleared his throat. "Regardless of your professional background, Ms. Mitchell, we cannot delay this flight further without a legitimate safety concern. All passengers with valid boarding passes will remain in their assigned seats." "So you're refusing to take appropriate security measures?" Vanessa asked incredulously. "He'll be reporting this to your corporate headquarters immediately." The irony of this threat hung in the air as Sandra tried unsuccessfully to suppress a small smile. Captain Bennett maintained his composure, though a hint of amusement briefly crossed his features. "You're welcome to contact our corporate offices with any concerns," he said evenly. "Now, if there are no actual safety issues to address, we need to prepare for departure." Vanessa, sensing her authority slipping away, made a final, desperate attempt. She turned directly to Gabrielle. "You haven't said much to defend yourself. Is that because you know I'm right, that you somehow manipulated your way into a seat where you don't belong?" The cabin fell silent. All eyes turned to Gabrielle, who had maintained remarkable composure throughout the confrontation. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but carried natural authority that commanded attention. "I haven't defended myself because there's nothing to defend. I have a valid ticket for seat 1A. Your assumptions about who belongs here say more about you than about me." The dignity of this response resonated with the other passengers. Several nodded in agreement. From across the aisle, Lucia Hernandez spoke again. "I think we've all witnessed enough to understand what's really happening here. This isn't about security protocols or passenger verification. This is about assumptions based on appearance." "Exactly," Jordan added from her seat behind Gabrielle. "And I've recorded the entire interaction. Documenting patterns matters, doesn't it, Ms.?" Vanessa turned eyes widening as she realized how many passengers were watching and judging her behavior. "This is ridiculous. I'm trying to maintain proper standards." "What standards exactly?" Lucia pressed. "The standard that first class is reserved for certain types of people, because that's what this sounds like to everyone watching." The social dynamics in the cabin had shifted dramatically. What began as one woman's entitled aggression had transformed into a public referendum on prejudice and belonging. Vanessa was no longer controlling the narrative. She was being held accountable by a jury of fellow passengers. Captain Bennett, recognizing the situation had moved beyond a simple seating dispute, made an executive decision. We need to resolve this immediately to avoid further delays. Ms. Mitchell, you have two options: return to your assigned seat and discontinue this disruption, or I can arrange for you to take a later flight. You're threatening to remove me? Vanessa asked incredulously. Do you have any idea who I am, or who I know in this industry am not threatening anything? The captain replied calmly. I'm offering options to resolve a situation that's delaying departure for all passengers. Vanessa looked around the cabin, seemingly expecting support, but finding only disapproval in the eyes of other travelers. Realizing her position was untenable, she retreated slightly. Fine, she said tightly. I'll remain in my seat, but I will be filing formal complaints about how this situation was handled. That's your right, Captain Bennett acknowledged. He turned to Gabrielle with a subtle but noticeable shift in demeanor, the nearly imperceptible difference between addressing a regular passenger and addressing someone recognized as significant. I apologize for the disruption. Gabrielle nodded graciously. Thank you, Captain. I appreciate your handling of the situation. As Captain Bennett and Miguel stepped away to resume departure preparations, Sandra lingered momentarily. She made a small adjustment to Gabrielle's seat as if providing standard first-class service, but her quiet words were meant for Gabrielle alone. It's good to see you on board, Ms. Kennedy. Should I inform the team of your presence? Not necessary, Sandra Gabrielle replied softly. I'm just experiencing the flight as our passengers do today. Sandra nodded with understanding and stepped away. This brief exchange went unnoticed by Vanessa, who was busily tapping on her phone, presumably drafting complaints to airline management, unaware that the very founder and CEO of Air Vista Airlines sat beside her. The confrontation had reached a temporary détente, but the tension remained palpable. Vanessa sat rigidly radiating indignation and entitlement. Gabrielle returned to reviewing her notes for the Atlanta meeting, outwardly composed despite the unnecessary drama. Neither woman spoke directly to the other as the aircraft finally pushed back from the gate nearly 20 minutes behind schedule. The delay would affect connecting passengers, crew hours, and subsequent flights. Exactly the kind of operational impact that Gabrielle had built her airline to minimize. As the engine spooled up for taxi, Jordan leaned forward slightly from her seat behind them. Excuse me, she said, addressing Gabrielle quietly. I just wanted to say that I admire how you handled that situation. Dignity always speaks volumes. Thank you, Gabrielle replied with a warm smile. Sometimes the most powerful response is simply refusing to let others define your worth. Vanessa stared stonily ahead, pretending not to hear this exchange, but clearly registering every word. Her grip on her armrest tightened, knuckles whitening with the effort of maintaining her composure in the face of mounting public judgment. What she didn't realize was that this confrontation was far from over. The revelation of Gabrielle's true identity was merely delayed, not prevented. And when it finally came, it would transform not just this flight, but potentially the culture of air travel itself. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude of 37,000 feet. The captain has turned off the fasten seatbelt sign, though we do recommend keeping your seatbelt fastened while seated. Our flight attendants will begin beverage service momentarily. The flight had maintained a tense quiet since takeoff. Vanessa had buried herself in her phone, aggressively typing what appeared to be emails or messages, occasionally shooting sidelong glances at Gabrielle, who remained focused on her tablet reviewing documents for her Atlanta meeting. The artificial calm broke when Miguel approached with the beverage cart. May I offer you something to drink? Sparkling water, please, Gabrielle requested. I'll have the Chardonnay, Vanessa said curtly, not looking up from her phone. The reserve, not the standard offering. Miguel served their drinks with professional courtesy. As he handed Gabrielle her sparkling water, he hesitated briefly. Would you care for anything else, Mom? Perhaps something from our premium menu? There was a subtle difference in his tone, a deference that hadn't been present during boarding. Vanessa noticed immediately, her head tilting slightly as she observed the interaction. "Nothing else for now." "Thank you," Gabrielle replied with a warm smile. After Miguel moved on, Vanessa sipped her wine in silence for several minutes before finally addressing Gabrielle directly. "Interesting how the service improves once they think you belong," she observed, her tone deliberately casual but laced with lingering disdain. Gabrielle turned slightly toward her. "The service has been professional throughout. Perhaps perception colors how we experience interactions." "That's quite philosophical for someone who was nearly removed from first class an hour ago," Vanessa replied with a tight smile. "Was I?" Gabrielle asked, mildly. "I don't recall being at risk of removal at any point." This simple contradiction to Vanessa's narrative visibly irritated her. "Well, clearly there was confusion about your status. Otherwise, the captain wouldn't have been called." "The captain was called because you insisted on it," Gabrielle pointed out. "Not because there was any legitimate question about my status." Vanessa's jaw tightened. She was unused to being directly challenged. "I've been in this industry for 20 years. I know when something doesn't fit the protocol." "Which protocol specifically?" Gabrielle asked, her voice remaining conversational. "I'd be interested to know which airline regulation addresses passenger appearance." A few rows back, Lucia Hernandez looked up from her book, clearly listening to the exchange. Jordan Lewis had her phone positioned discreetly, still recording. "Don't twist my words," Vanessa hissed, lowering her voice. "This isn't about appearance. It's about patterns and experience. First class has certain expectations." "I'm familiar with those expectations," Gabrielle replied calmly. "Comfort, service, space, none of which have anything to do with what passengers look like." "You're deliberately missing my point," Vanessa said, frustration evident in her tone. "I don't believe I am," Gabrielle countered. "Your point seems quite clear to everyone on this aircraft." The conversation paused as Sandra approached their row, ostensibly to check on their beverage needs but carrying a small folded note. She discreetly handed it to Gabrielle. "Pardon the interruption. I thought you might want this information before we land." Gabrielle unfolded the note and read it quickly. It contained details about the discrimination complaints from Phoenix and Denver. Information Sandra had gathered from other crew members knowing of Gabrielle's ongoing investigation. Vanessa watched this interaction with narrowed eyes. "Passing notes now. How unprofessional." Sandra smiled pleasantly. "Is there anything else I can get for you, Ms. Mitchell? An explanation for why this passenger is receiving preferential treatment would be nice," Vanessa replied sharply. First, the captain's special attention, now private notes from the crew. Sandra's expression remained professionally neutral, though a hint of amusement touched her eyes. "We strive to provide excellent service to all our first-class passengers, ma'am." As Sandra moved away, Vanessa turned back to Gabrielle with renewed suspicion. "Who exactly are you? Some relative of an airline executive using family connections?" Gabrielle considered her response carefully. The moment for revelation was approaching, but timing mattered. This confrontation had already provided valuable insights into the passenger experience that would inform policy changes, exactly the kind of unfiltered feedback her incognito travels were designed to gather. "I'm simply another passenger," Gabrielle replied. "Though I am curious about your company's relationship with airlines. You mentioned Ground Operations Solutions handles operations for multiple carriers." The slight pivot worked. Vanessa immediately seized the opportunity to assert her importance. We're the largest aviation services contractor in the country, she declared with evident pride. Check-in baggage handling, gate operations. We do it all. Airlines outsource to us because we maintain higher standards than they could achieve internally. "Interesting," Gabrielle said. "And which airlines specifically contract with your company?" "All the major carriers except a few stubborn holdouts," Vanessa replied dismissively. "Over 60% of domestic flights involve our services somewhere in the journey. We're practically running the industry behind the scenes." Gabrielle nodded thoughtfully. And your role specifically, I'm Regional Operations Director for the Western Division, Vanessa said, clearly pleased to be discussing her importance. I oversee service delivery at 12 major airports. That's why I recognize when protocols aren't being followed properly. I see, Gabrielle said. So, you're familiar with Air Vista's operations model? Vanessa waved her hand vaguely. Of course. Small carrier trying to compete with the big players. They'll eventually realize they need our services to scale efficiently. All the independents do eventually. This fundamental misunderstanding of Air Vista's business model, the airline had deliberately built its reputation on keeping operations in-house specifically to maintain service quality, nearly caused Gabrielle to smile. Instead, she maintained her neutral expression. You mentioned reporting today's situation to corporate headquarters, Gabrielle noted. Who specifically would you contact? I have direct lines to executives at every major airline, Vanessa boasted. One call from me and flight attendants get reassigned to less desirable routes. Pilots get schedule audits. That's the reality of this industry. It's about who you know and who respects your authority. The revealing statement hung in the air. Several nearby passengers exchanged glances, clearly troubled by this casual admission of using corporate connections to punish employees who displeased her. From her seat behind them, Jordan spoke up. Excuse me, but did you just say you regularly contact airlines to have staff punished for not giving you preferential treatment? Vanessa turned sharply. Mind your own business, and stop recording me. It is my business when someone threatens airline staff with retaliation, Jordan replied calmly, especially when those threats appear to be based on prejudice. Other passengers had begun to pay close attention to the exchange. The confrontation was no longer private. It had become a public referendum on privilege and its abuses. You have no idea how this industry works, Vanessa snapped. Relationships and standards matter. Some people simply don't belong in premium spaces. This blatant statement caused audible reactions throughout the cabin. Lucia Hernandez closed her book entirely, her attorney's instincts clearly engaged by the increasingly explicit nature of Vanessa's comments. Would you care to clarify which people don't belong? Lucia asked pointedly. Vanessa seemed to suddenly realize she had an audience and that her statements were being judged and recorded. She attempted to backpedal. I'm referring to people without proper qualifications or experience. This has nothing to do with personal characteristics. Yet you made assumptions about this passenger, Jordan noted, gesturing toward Gabrielle based solely on her appearance. You questioned her right to be here without knowing anything about her qualifications, experience, or status. The cabin had fallen completely silent. Even passengers who had been trying to mind their own business were now fully invested in the unfolding drama. Vanessa, cornered by her own statements and the mounting social pressure, turned to Gabrielle with frustration. Why aren't you saying anything? You're letting these people put words in my mouth and mischaracterize my concerns. Gabrielle set her tablet aside and finally turned to face Vanessa directly. The moment had arrived. Ms. Mitchell. She began, her voice carrying a quiet authority that immediately commanded attention. I've been listening carefully to your perspective. It's been quite illuminating. Illuminating? Vanessa repeated suspiciously. Yes, Gabrielle continued. You see, I've been investigating reports of discriminatory treatment at several airports. Today's experience has been unfortunately consistent with those reports. Vanessa's expression shifted from suspicion to confusion. Investigating? What are you talking about? Who exactly are you? Gabrielle extended her hand in a formal greeting. Gabrielle Kennedy, founder and CEO of Air Vista Airlines, the carrier you're currently flying with and the owner of this aircraft. The revelation landed like a thunderclap in the cabin. Vanessa's face drained of color so rapidly it was as if someone had pulled a plug. Her mouth opened but no words emerged. Jordan gasped audibly. Lucia Hernandez smiled with sudden understanding. Other passengers exchanged wide-eyed looks of shock and growing recognition. "You're... what?" Vanessa finally managed her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm the CEO of Air Vista." Gabrielle repeated calmly. "I regularly travel as a regular passenger to experience our service firsthand. Today has been particularly educational." Miguel, who had been approaching with the snack service, stopped in his tracks, his expression transforming to one of professional panic as he realized the CEO had been witnessing the entire confrontation without the crew's knowledge. "Ms. Kennedy," he stammered. "I had no idea." Gabrielle smiled reassuringly. "You handled the situation professionally, Miguel. That's exactly what I expect from our team." Vanessa remained frozen, the implications of her behavior suddenly crashing down on her. She had spent the past hour belittling, questioning, and attempting to intimidate the very person who controlled the airline. Someone with actual authority in the industry, not just assumed importance based on business connections. There must be some misunderstanding," Vanessa finally managed. Her voice strained. "There certainly was," Gabrielle agreed. "Though not about my right to be in seat 1A. The power dynamic had reversed completely. Vanessa Mitchell, who had been so certain of her authority and so comfortable wielding it against someone she deemed unworthy, now found herself exposed and vulnerable. "If you'll excuse me," Gabrielle said, rising from her seat. "I'd like to speak with our crew briefly." As she stepped into the aisle, several passengers spontaneously began to applaud. A quiet, respectful acknowledgement that spread throughout the cabin. Gabrielle nodded in gracious acknowledgement before moving toward the galley where the flight attendants had gathered, their expressions a mixture of shock and concern. Behind her, Vanessa Mitchell sat motionless, staring straight ahead as the full impact of her miscalculation continued to register. The woman she had tried to humiliate and remove from first class wasn't just any passenger. She was the visionary who had built the entire airline from nothing, designing every aspect of the experience, including the very seat Vanessa had tried to claim as her exclusive domain. The revelation had transformed not just the dynamic between two passengers, but the atmosphere of the entire cabin. As Gabrielle spoke quietly with her crew in the galley, the other passengers exchanged glances of amazement and satisfaction at witnessing such poetic justice unfold in real time. Complete silence enveloped the first-class cabin. Vanessa Mitchell sat perfectly still, her complexion ashen, her eyes fixed straight ahead as if hoping to disappear from the situation entirely. The wine glass she had been holding remained suspended halfway to her lips, her hand frozen in midair before she carefully set it down. The revelation of Gabrielle Kennedy's identity had struck with the force of a thunderbolt, leaving Vanessa visibly shaken. Her earlier confidence and entitlement had evaporated instantly, replaced by the dawning horror of recognition. She had spent the past hour attempting to humiliate, question, and remove the founder and CEO of the very airline she was flying. Around them, passengers exchanged glances of astonishment and barely concealed satisfaction. Jordan Lewis, still recording from seat 2A, leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Mitchell," she said quietly, "you mentioned something earlier about people knowing their place. It seems the universe has a sense of humor today." Vanessa didn't respond. She appeared incapable of speech, her mind visibly racing to process the catastrophic miscalculation she had made and its potential consequences. In the galley, Gabrielle spoke in hushed tones with her flight crew. Miguel Fuentes and Sandra Wilson stood with professional posture but evident apprehension, unsure whether their handling of the situation would be deemed appropriate. "I want to be clear," Gabrielle assured them. "You both managed a difficult situation professionally. That's exactly what I expect from our team." Relief washed over their faces. "Ms. Kennedy, if we had known you were on board," Miguel began, "then you would have treated me differently." Gabrielle completed his thought, "Which is precisely why I travel this way. I need to experience our service as our customers do." She glanced back toward the cabin. "This incident highlights issues we need to address. not just on this flight, but across our entire operation. The situation was uncomfortable for everyone, Sandra acknowledged. But you handled it with such dignity. Years of practice, Gabrielle replied with a hint of weariness that revealed the personal toll of such encounters. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time I've faced assumptions about where I belong. She straightened her shoulders, her momentary vulnerability replaced by purposeful energy. I'd like to address the passengers briefly. Then we can resume normal service. As Gabrielle returned to the cabin, conversations hushed. All eyes turned toward her expectant. Even Vanessa looked up, her expression a complex mixture of embarrassment, fear, and defensive anger. Gabrielle stood in the center aisle where everyone could see her. When she spoke, her voice carried natural authority tempered with genuine warmth. Good morning, everyone. For those who may not have heard, I'm Gabrielle Kennedy, founder and CEO of Air Airlines. First, I want to apologize for the disruption to your flight experience today. A passenger from the back called out, "You have nothing to apologize for, Ms. Kennedy." Gabrielle smiled appreciatively but continued. Air Vista was founded on a simple principle: that every passenger deserves dignity, respect, and exceptional service regardless of who they are or what they look like. Her gaze briefly met Vanessa's before continuing. Today's incident highlights why that mission remains so important. In our 14 years of operation, we've worked to build an airline where everyone belongs, where service is based on the ticket you hold, not assumptions about who should hold it. Passengers nodded in agreement. Some had taken out phones to record her impromptu address. I regularly travel as a regular passenger because it helps me understand your experience without the filter of special treatment. Today has been particularly educational. This last comment elicited knowing smiles throughout the cabin. I want to thank our flight crew for handling a challenging situation professionally. And I want to thank those of you who spoke up when you witnessed behavior inconsistent with the values we promote at Air Vista. Lucia Hernandez and Jordan Lewis both received appreciative nods from fellow passengers. When we land in Atlanta, our team will ensure everyone reaches their destinations as efficiently as possible, especially those who may have missed connections due to our delayed departure. Gabrielle's natural leadership presence transformed what could have been an uncomfortably voyeuristic moment into something more meaningful, a reaffirmation of values and accountability. Now, if you excuse me, he'll retake my seat so our wonderful crew can continue their service. Thank you for choosing Air Vista today. As Gabrielle returned to seat 1A, spontaneous applause erupted throughout the cabin. She acknowledged it with a gracious nod before sitting down beside Vanessa, who remained rigidly upright, staring straight ahead. Several minutes of tense silence passed between them before Vanessa finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "I didn't realize who you were." "That's rather the point," Gabrielle replied evenly. "No passenger should be treated differently based on who they are, or who they're perceived to be." Vanessa swallowed hard. "This is a misunderstanding. My concerns were about security protocols, not Ms. Mitchell." Gabrielle interrupted gently. "We both know what your concerns were about. The question is, what happens next?" Fear flashed across Vanessa's face. "What do you mean actions have consequences?" Gabrielle said simply. "Especially in an industry built on relationships, as you pointed out earlier." The implication hung between them. Vanessa's earlier boasts about her connections and ability to punish airline staff now returned as a devastating irony. "You wouldn't," Vanessa began, then faltered, unsure what leverage she could possibly claim. "I wouldn't what?" Gabrielle asked. "Contact executives at your company. Inform them about how their regional operations director conducts herself. Share the videos that several passengers have recorded." Vanessa paled further. "That would be vindictive. One misunderstanding shouldn't define someone's entire career. Interesting perspective, Gabrielle noted, especially from someone who just 30 minutes ago threatened to have our staff reassigned to less desirable routes for not giving you preferential treatment. This reminder of her own words left Vanessa speechless once again. Miguel approached with the snack service. His professional demeanor remained intact, though he now addressed Gabrielle with the respect her position warranted. "Ms. Kennedy, would you care for something from our premium menu?" "Just the mixed nuts, thank you, Miguel." She turned to Vanessa. "And for you, Ms. Mitchell." Vanessa shook her head silently, her appetite apparently gone. As Miguel moved on, Gabrielle opened her tablet again, reviewing notes for her Atlanta meeting. She worked quietly, seemingly untroubled by the tension that still hung between them. Vanessa finally gathered enough composure to attempt damage control. "Ms. Kennedy, I hope we can resolve this situation professionally. My company values its industry relationships." "As do I," Gabrielle replied without looking up. "Which is why I take very seriously any threats to my staff's well-being or attempts to undermine the inclusive environment we've worked so hard to create. I never intended intentions matter less than impact," Gabrielle interrupted gently. "The impact of your behavior today was felt by everyone on this aircraft." The conversation paused as the captain's voice came over the intercom announcing their initial descent into Atlanta. Passengers began preparing for landing, though many still glanced occasionally toward the now infamous Row 1. Jordan leaned forward again. "Ms. Kennedy, I just wanted to say what an honor it is to meet you even under these circumstances. You're a huge inspiration to young black women like me pursuing business careers." Gabrielle turned with a genuine smile. "Thank you. That means a great deal to me. It's why representation matters in every industry. Would it be possible to speak with you briefly after we land? I'm actually studying aviation management at Howard University." "I'd be happy to," Gabrielle agreed. "Find me after deplaning." This exchange seemed to deepen Vanessa's discomfort. The reality of her miscalculation continued to unfold in layers. Not just embarrassment and potential professional consequences, but the recognition that she had attempted to belittle someone who served as a powerful role model for the next generation. As the aircraft began its final approach, the cabin settled into silence. Vanessa stared out the window, her reflection in the plexiglass showing an expression of mounting concern. Gabrielle reviewed her meeting notes with composed focus, seemingly untroubled by the lingering tension. The wheels touched down on the Atlanta runway with a gentle thud. As the aircraft taxied toward the terminal, passengers began gathering belongings and preparing to deplane. The normal post-landing bustle resumed, though the atmosphere in first class remained charged with unresolved emotion. When the seatbelt sign finally dinged off, Vanessa turned to Gabrielle with a final, desperate attempt at reconciliation. "Ms. Kennedy, I sincerely hope this unfortunate misunderstanding won't affect professional relationships moving forward. Perhaps we could discuss this privately." Gabrielle considered the request thoughtfully. "I believe in addressing problems rather than avoiding them. Ms. Mitchell, when behaviors harm people, acknowledging that harm is the first step toward meaningful change." "I understand," Vanessa replied, though her expression suggested otherwise. "What exactly are you planning to do about today's incident?" "That depends partly on you," Gabrielle said. "True accountability begins with honest recognition of impact, not just damage control." Before Vanessa could respond, the aircraft door opened and deplaning began. The confrontation that had dominated the flight had reached a temporary pause, but its repercussions were just beginning to unfold. As passengers filed toward the exit, many nodded respectfully to Gabrielle or offered brief words of support. The social verdict was clear. They had witnessed something significant, a moment when entitlement and prejudice had been met not with matching hostility, but with dignified strength and clear values. Vanessa Mitchell gathered her belongings with trembling hands, her earlier confidence replaced by palpable anxiety about what awaited her beyond the aircraft door. Gabrielle Kennedy remained seated, allowing other passengers to deplane first, a final demonstration of the consideration for others that had built her airline from concept to reality. The jet bridge hummed with activity as passengers disembarked. Gabrielle Kennedy stood near the aircraft door, speaking briefly with Captain Bennett and the flight crew. Despite the unplanned nature of her revealed identity, she maintained her characteristic poise and warm, professional demeanor. "I've contacted Atlanta operations," she informed them quietly. "They're arranging assistance for passengers with tight connections. Priority rebooking for anyone who missed their connecting flight." "Thank you, Ms. Kennedy," Captain Bennett replied. "I apologize again for how the situation was handled initially." "No apology necessary," she assured him. "You responded professionally with the information you had at the time." Vanessa Mitchell hovered uncertainly nearby, clutching her designer bag like a shield. Her earlier entitlement had evaporated, replaced by visible anxiety about the consequences awaiting her. She attempted to slip past unnoticed, but Gabrielle turned toward her. "Ms. Mitchell, a moment, please." Vanessa froze her expression, suggesting she'd rather face almost any alternative than this conversation. "Ms. Kennedy, I really need to catch my connection." "This won't take long," Gabrielle replied with gentle firmness. She guided Vanessa slightly away from the deplaning passengers, creating a small pocket of privacy in the busy terminal. "I want to be clear about something," Gabrielle began. "What happened today wasn't simply a personal insult to me. It represents exactly the kind of experience that erodes dignity for countless travelers every day." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. "As I said on the aircraft, there was a misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding." Gabrielle interrupted her tone, remaining even but allowing no evasion. "You made explicit assumptions about who belongs in premium spaces based solely on appearance. You attempted to use your professional position to intimidate our staff. You threatened retribution against employees who didn't accommodate your demands. Each point landed like a gentle but unavoidable truth." Vanessa's gaze dropped to the floor. "Your behavior today would be unacceptable directed toward any passenger," Gabrielle continued. "The fact that it happened to be directed toward me simply means it can become a catalyst for necessary change." "What kind of change?" Vanessa asked cautiously. "He'll be contacting the CEO of Ground Operations Solutions personally this afternoon," Gabrielle stated. "Not to demand your termination as you might fear, but to discuss implementing comprehensive training protocols addressing exactly the behaviors witnessed today." This wasn't what Vanessa had expected. Her relief at avoiding immediate career destruction was tempered by uncertainty about what this alternative consequence might mean. Training protocols. Yes. Your company services multiple airlines and interacts with thousands of diverse passengers daily. The attitudes displayed today cause real harm when embedded in operational practices. Gabrielle's approach wasn't punitive in the way Vanessa had anticipated, but something potentially more transformative. This incident will serve as a case study, anonymized but detailed, for every employee in customer-facing positions. The impact of assumptions and microaggressions in travel environments, the business costs of alienating passengers, the human dignity at stake in every interaction. Vanessa's expression shifted between relief at escaping immediate termination and discomfort at becoming an instructional example. "I see," she managed. "Do you?" Gabrielle asked genuinely. "Because understanding the real impact of today's behavior is essential. This isn't about embarrassment or a momentary lapse in judgment. It's about patterns that affect real people every day." Around them, the terminal continued its constant flow of travelers. Business people rushing to connections, families navigating with children, solo travelers absorbed in their own journeys. Gabrielle gestured subtly toward this human landscape. Every person passing us has their own story, their own purpose, their own right to move through the world with dignity. When we create environments where some people are constantly questioned about their right to occupy certain spaces, we diminish the experience for everyone. This perspective, focusing on collective impact rather than personal revenge, seemed to finally penetrate Vanessa's defensive shell. Her shoulders dropped slightly as the first hint of genuine recognition crossed her features. "I never thought of it that way," she admitted quietly. "Few people do until they experience it personally," Gabrielle acknowledged. "Which is why education matters so much." Nearby, Jordan Lewis waited patiently, having remembered Gabrielle's offer to speak briefly after deplaning. Gabrielle noticed her and nodded in acknowledgement before turning back to Vanessa. "I need to prepare for my meeting, and you likely have a connection to make. But remember this moment, Ms. Mitchell. Not just the embarrassment of discovery, but the opportunity it presents to reconsider assumptions that may have gone unchallenged throughout your career." With that, Gabrielle extended her hand, a professional courtesy that visibly surprised Vanessa. After a moment's hesitation, Vanessa shook it briefly. "Thank you for not destroying my career," Vanessa said awkwardly. "Consequences should educate, not just punish," Gabrielle replied. "Though I should mention that several passengers recorded today's interaction. In our connected world, accountability often extends beyond official channels. This reminder that the incident might have a digital life beyond the flight caused Vanessa to pale slightly. She nodded once more before hurrying away toward her connecting gate. Gabrielle turned to Jordan, who approached with evident admiration. "Ms. Kennedy, thank you so much for taking time to speak with me. What you did back there was incredible." "What specifically impressed you?" Gabrielle asked with genuine interest. "The way you maintained your dignity throughout, even when you had every right to be angry. And then offering education instead of just punishment. It was masterful." Gabrielle smiled. "Education creates lasting change. Punishment often just creates resentment." "I'm studying aviation management at Howard," Jordan explained. "Your career path has been such an inspiration. Building Air Vista from nothing, especially as a black woman in an industry that's historically been resistant to change." Gabrielle supplied with a knowing smile. "Exactly. Would you mind if I asked what advice you'd give someone hoping to follow a similar path?" Gabrielle considered the question thoughtfully. "Never let others define what's possible for you. When I proposed starting an airline, I was told repeatedly it couldn't be done. Not by someone with my background. Each rejection refined my approach without diminishing my vision." She continued, "And remember that how you succeed matters as much as whether you succeed. Build organizations that reflect the values you wish existed in the world." Jordan nodded eagerly, absorbing each word. "That's powerful advice." "Thank you. Here," Gabrielle said, pulling a business card from her briefcase. "Email my office about our internship program. We're always looking for passionate people who understand our mission." Jordan accepted the card with visible emotion. "I will definitely do that." "Thank you so much." As they parted ways, Gabrielle checked her watch. Despite the flight delay, she still had time to prepare for her merger meeting. She headed toward the executive lounge, already mentally transitioning from the morning's confrontation to the afternoon's strategic business discussion. What she didn't yet realize was how quickly the incident was spreading beyond the aircraft. Jordan's video had already been uploaded to social media with the caption, "White woman tries to remove black passenger from first class. Turns out she built the airline." Within the hour, it would begin its viral journey across platforms, sparking conversations about privilege assumptions and belonging that would extend far beyond this single flight or airline. The private confrontation between two women was transforming into a public referendum on dignity and respect in shared spaces. As Gabrielle Kennedy prepared for her meeting, the culmination of years of strategic planning and business development, the ripple effects of Seat 1A were just beginning to spread outward, touching lives and prompting reflections far beyond what either woman could have anticipated when they boarded Flight 447 that morning. Ms. Kennedy, the board chair, just arrived in the conference room. The final merger documents are prepared for review. James Rivera, Air Vista's COO, stood in the doorway of the private office Gabrielle had been using to prepare for the afternoon's crucial meeting. Her composed expression gave no indication of the morning's dramatic confrontation. "Thank you, James. He'll be there momentarily." As he turned to leave, he hesitated. "I should mention, there's a situation developing on social media. A video from your flight this morning has gone viral." Gabrielle paused. "How viral?" "Over 200,000 views in the past hour, climbing rapidly. Major news outlets are requesting comment. Our communications team is fielding inquiries about the Air Vista CEO confrontation." She nodded thoughtfully. "Have them prepare a statement emphasizing our commitment to dignity for all passengers. No personal attacks against the other individual involved. Focus on our values and mission." "Already in progress," James assured her. "The public response has been overwhelmingly supportive of you and Air Vista. People are sharing their own experiences with similar treatment. The unplanned visibility created an interesting dynamic on the day of their most significant business negotiation. Let's use this moment constructively," Gabrielle decided. "After the merger announcement, we'll unveil the new passenger dignity protocols we've been developing. The timing couldn't be more relevant." James smiled appreciatively. "Always finding the strategic opportunity. That's why we follow you." "Not an opportunity I would have chosen," Gabrielle admitted, "but one we can use to drive positive change." As they walked toward the conference room, Gabrielle's phone buzzed with a text from Tanya Rodriguez, her assistant. "Video at 1.2 million views. Hatched Air Vista values and #SeatIB trending. Media requesting interviews." The merger meeting proceeded with the focused professionalism that had built Air Vista's reputation. Sunbelt Airlines board chair, impressed by the strategic vision Gabrielle presented, signed the final agreements that would create the nation's newest major carrier. "Congratulations, Ms. Kennedy," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "You've built something remarkable from nothing. Sunbelt is proud to join forces with Air Vista. The combined strength of our networks will create something greater than either airline could achieve alone," Gabrielle replied, "while maintaining the values that have defined both our companies." As champagne was poured to celebrate the historic agreement, Gabrielle's phone continued buzzing with updates. The morning's confrontation had struck a powerful chord with the public, sparking conversations about privilege, belonging, and accountability in public spaces. Meanwhile, Vanessa Mitchell sat alone in an airport restaurant, staring at her own phone in growing horror. The video had spread with astonishing speed, her face and words now exposed to millions of viewers. Her initial desperate damage control attempts, sending explanatory emails to her supervisors, calling industry contacts, had been overtaken by the viral velocity of the story. Her phone rang. The caller ID displayed her CEO's name. "Vanessa," he began without preamble, "I've just had a remarkably gracious call from Gabrielle Kennedy. We need to discuss what happened this morning." "Sir, I can explain." "The explanation will need to be thorough," he interrupted. "Ms. Kennedy wasn't calling for punitive action, which frankly surprises me, given what I've seen in the videos. Instead, she proposed a joint initiative on passenger dignity training. She's turning this incident into an educational opportunity." Vanessa sat in stunned silence. The consequences shed feared, immediate termination, industry blacklisting, weren't materializing in the expected form. Instead, something potentially more profound was unfolding. You're being placed on administrative leave effective immediately while we conduct a full review, her CEO continued. Upon your return, you'll be heading up the implementation of the new training protocols, using your first-hand experience with this incident to drive meaningful change in how our staff interact with diverse passengers. The elegant accountability of this approach left Vanessa speechless. Rather than simply being punished or discarded, she was being tasked with becoming an agent of the very transformation her behavior had made necessary. I understand, she managed finally. I'm not sure you do, but that's part of the process, her CEO replied. This incident has created a significant learning opportunity for our entire organization. Ms. Kennedy has offered to personally participate in developing the training materials. Your role will be to implement them across all our operations. After the call ended, Vanessa sat motionless, processing the unexpected direction her career had just taken. Her phone continued lighting up with notifications as the video spread, further commentary accumulated, and her name became temporarily synonymous with entitlement and prejudice. Back in the Air Vista conference room, Gabrielle addressed the combined executive teams from both airlines. Today marks a historic merger, but it also highlights something equally important. How we conduct ourselves matters. This morning's incident, which many of you may have seen circulating online, reflects challenges that persist throughout the travel industry. Heads nodded around the table. Several executives had already viewed the viral video. Rather than focusing on individual blame, we're announcing a new initiative, the Passenger Dignity Commitment. Every employee from boarding gate to flight deck will receive enhanced training on creating truly inclusive travel experiences. She outlined the comprehensive approach: anonymous testing of customer service practices, regular review of complaint patterns, revised protocols for addressing disputes, and partnerships with civil rights organizations to develop evidence-based training materials. The merged airline will lead by example, Gabrielle concluded. We'll measure success not just in financial metrics, but in creating an environment where every passenger is treated with equal respect, regardless of appearance, background, or assumptions. The initiative received immediate support from both executive teams. What had begun as a personal confrontation was transforming into structural change with potential industry-wide impact. As the meeting concluded, Gabrielle stepped aside to take a call from a major news network requesting an interview about the viral incident. I'd be happy to discuss our new passenger dignity commitment, she told the producer, but I won't participate in personally attacking the other individual involved. This isn't about one person's behavior. It's about creating lasting change in travel culture. This approach, focusing on solutions rather than condemnation, resonated powerfully with the public. By evening, the hashtag #DignityInTravel was trending alongside clips of the original confrontation. Across the country, passengers shared their own experiences of being questioned, challenged, or made to feel unwelcome in premium travel spaces. The conversation expanded beyond airlines to hotels, restaurants, and retail establishments. Anywhere people experienced the subtle or explicit message that they didn't belong. Gabrielle's measured response became a case study in effective leadership, using an individual incident as catalyst for structural change without descending into personal attacks. Aviation industry publications highlighted Air Vista's approach as a model for addressing unconscious bias and improving customer experience. For Vanessa Mitchell, the consequences unfolded in multiple dimensions. The administrative leave provided time for reflection that her busy executive schedule had never allowed. The public nature of the incident created uncomfortable conversations with friends and family who recognized her in the footage. The assignment to implement training upon her return offered a path to professional redemption through meaningful contribution rather than mere punishment. 3 days after the flight, she sent Gabrielle Kennedy a handwritten note. Ms. Kennedy, words cannot adequately express my regret for my behavior on Flight 447. What began as entitlement became something far worse. Seeing myself through the lens of that video has been painful but necessary. Your response, choosing education over punishment, transformation over retribution, reflects a leadership approach I hope to learn from. While I cannot undo the harm caused, I commit to using this experience to drive meaningful change in how our organization interacts with all passengers. With sincere appreciation for your grace under pressure, Vanessa Mitchell. Gabrielle read the note thoughtfully. The sincerity seemed genuine, though real change would require sustained effort beyond initial remorse. She filed the note in her briefcase, a reminder that transformation begins with recognition and continues through persistent action. As the merger integration proceeded in the weeks that followed, the passenger dignity commitment became a cornerstone of the combined airline's public identity. Industry observers noted how a potentially damaging viral incident had instead become a powerful brand differentiator and catalyst for cultural change. What began in Seat 1A had expanded far beyond a personal confrontation between two women. It had opened a necessary conversation about who belongs in which spaces, who decides, and how assumptions shape experiences in ways both subtle and profound. For Gabrielle Kennedy, the incident reinforced her long-standing commitment to building an airline where dignity wasn't a premium amenity but a universal right. For Vanessa Mitchell, it began a challenging but necessary journey toward recognizing and addressing her own biases. And for the millions who watched the video, commented, shared their stories, and followed the aftermath, it provided a rare moment of accountability and transformation playing out in real time. A reminder that change becomes possible when unspoken rules are finally spoken, examined, and rewritten. 3 months later, Gabrielle Kennedy stood before a diverse group of new flight attendants in Air Vista's expanded training facility. The merged airline's distinctive logo, combining elements from both original carriers, adorned the wall behind her. Morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating eager faces watching her with admiration. "Welcome to your final day of training," Gabrielle began, her warm voice carrying naturally through the room. "Today we're discussing something fundamental to our airline's identity, the Kennedy Protocol for Passenger Dignity." The name had been chosen by the training department despite Gabrielle's modest objections. It had quickly become industry shorthand for a comprehensive approach to inclusive customer service. 3 months ago, an incident occurred that many of you probably saw online, she continued. What could have remained a painful personal experience instead became a catalyst for industry-wide reflection and change. Heads nodded throughout the room. The viral video had been viewed over 50 million times, sparking conversations far beyond the aviation community. The true measure of progress isn't how we respond to individual incidents, but how we transform systems to prevent them from happening again. She gestured toward the back of the room where Vanessa Mitchell stood quietly. Many trainees turned in surprise, recognizing her from the infamous video. Ms. Mitchell now leads implementation of the Dignity Training Program for Ground Operation Solutions, our partner at 17 airports. She's here today to share perspectives from both sides of that encounter. Vanessa stepped forward, visibly nervous but determined. The past 3 months had transformed her, not just professionally, but personally. The administrative leave had provided time for reflection that her busy executive schedule had never permitted. The public nature of the incident had prompted uncomfortable but necessary conversations with friends and family. "Thank you for allowing me to be here," Vanessa began, her voice steady despite her evident discomfort. 3 months ago, I was the person you all saw in that video, entitled judgmental and completely unaware of how my behavior affected others. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The easy narrative would be that I learned my lesson after being publicly exposed. But real change isn't that simple or immediate. It's an ongoing process of recognizing patterns I never had to see before. Vanessa described how the incident had forced her to examine assumptions that had gone unchallenged throughout her career, about who belongs in premium spaces, whose comfort matters, whose presence requires justification. "I'm not here seeking sympathy or forgiveness," she clarified. I'm here because authentic transformation requires acknowledging impact, not just intent. My actions that day revealed problems much larger than one uncomfortable flight. Together, Gabrielle and Vanessa outlined the core elements of the Kennedy Protocol now being implemented across the merged airline evidence-based training on unconscious bias, revised procedures for addressing passenger disputes, anonymous testing of customer service practices, and regular analysis of complaint patterns to identify potential disparities in treatment. This protocol isn't about political correctness or special treatment, Gabrielle emphasized. It's about consistent dignity for every passenger, the foundation of exceptional service. A young flight attendant raised her hand. Ms. Kennedy, has the industry been receptive to these changes? Initially, some viewed it as a passing response to a viral moment, Gabrielle acknowledged. But the business case has become increasingly clear. Airlines implementing similar protocols have seen measurable improvements in customer loyalty and reduced complaint handling costs. She continued. More importantly, we've heard from countless passengers who finally feel truly welcome in spaces where they previously felt merely tolerated. That fundamental shift in experience drives loyalty no marketing campaign could ever achieve. The training session concluded with practical scenarios, role-playing challenging situations flight attendants might encounter. Gabrielle observed with quiet satisfaction as the trainees applied the principles, thoughtfully demonstrating genuine understanding rather than mere compliance. As the group dispersed for their final certification assessments, Gabrielle found herself alone with Vanessa for the first time since their infamous flight. "Thank you for participating today," Gabrielle said. "Your perspective adds important dimensions to the training." Vanessa nodded. "It's still difficult to watch that video to see myself behaving that way. But that discomfort serves a purpose." "Growth usually requires discomfort," Gabrielle agreed. "How has the implementation been proceeding at your company?" "Challenging but necessary," Vanessa admitted. "Some colleagues initially viewed it as punishment for my viral moment rather than essential improvement. But as they've engaged with the material, many have recognized patterns in their own interactions that needed addressing." She hesitated before continuing. "My teenage daughter watched that video before I even landed in Atlanta. Her disappointment was illuminating. She asked questions I had no good answers for. That personal reckoning has been as important as the professional consequences." Gabrielle nodded thoughtfully. "The most meaningful accountability often comes from those closest to us." Before they parted ways, Vanessa asked a question that had clearly been on her mind. "Why did you handle it this way? You could have had me fired, blacklisted throughout the industry. You had every right to seek punishment after how I treated you." Gabrielle considered the question carefully. Punishment might have satisfied immediate emotion, but it wouldn't have created lasting change. By involving you in the solution, the impact extends far beyond one person or one incident. Later that afternoon, Gabrielle boarded another Air Vista flight. This time, she wasn't traveling incognito. Her position as CEO was known to the crew and many passengers who recognized her from recent media coverage. As she settled into seat 1A, a young black girl walking past with her mother whispered excitedly, "That's her mom, the lady who built the airline." The mother smiled apologetically for her daughter's enthusiasm, but Gabrielle waved away the concern. "What's your name?" she asked the girl, who appeared to be about 10 years old. "Amara," the child replied, suddenly shy but eyes shining with admiration. "Well, Amara, do you like airplanes?" The girl nodded eagerly. "I want to be a pilot someday." "Then you should have this," Gabrielle said, unpinning the small gold wings from her lapel, a memento from Air Vista's first flight 14 years earlier, to remind you that you belong anywhere your dreams take you. As Amara continued down the aisle, clutching her treasure, Gabrielle gazed out the window at the tarmac, bustling with activity. Aircraft bearing the new merged airlines livery were being prepared for destinations across the continent, each one carrying hundreds of individual journeys, hundreds of human stories. The incident in Seat 1B had created ripples extending far beyond one uncomfortable flight or viral video. It had opened necessary conversations about belonging, about who gets questioned and who doesn't, about the subtle and not-so-subtle ways people are made to feel unwelcome in spaces others take for granted. For Gabrielle Kennedy, the most meaningful outcome wasn't the policy changes or industry recognition, but moments like the one she'd just shared with Amara. Quiet affirmations that the next generation might move through the world with greater confidence in their right to occupy any space their talents and dreams could take them. As the aircraft door closed and preparations for departure began, Gabrielle smiled slightly at the symmetry. Her journey had begun 14 years ago with rejection and doubt, with being told she didn't belong in the aviation industry. Now she sat in Seat 1A of an airline she had built from nothing but vision and determination. A living reminder that sometimes the people told they don't belong in certain spaces are exactly the ones needed to transform those spaces for everyone. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Welcome aboard Air Vista Flight 2223. We're honored to have you with us today." The simple greeting carried deeper meaning now. Not just courtesy, but commitment to a fundamental vision where honor and dignity weren't reserved for some passengers, but extended to all. In that vision, Gabrielle Kennedy had built more than an airline. She had created a blueprint for belonging that would continue to influence the industry long after this flight reached its destination. If this story touched you the way it touched thousands of others who shared it, hit that subscribe button right now. We bring you powerful stories about dignity, respect, and justice every single week. Have you ever experienced someone making assumptions about you based on your appearance? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience matters, and it helps others find the courage to speak up. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, someone who might be questioning their own worth because of how others have treated them, share this video with them right now. Because when we stand together against prejudice, we create spaces where everyone can thrive. Remember what happened to Vanessa Mitchell the next time you find yourself making assumptions about someone else. The person you dismiss might just be the one who built the very world you're standing in.
А если вот так сделать? Нет, поверь, она будет... Смотри, брат. Пацаны, какой кадр лучше? Вот этот? Первый? Или вот этот кадр лучше? Ой. Понял? Не знаю. Все пишут первый реально, прикинь, а мне второй нравится почему-то. Нет, тут видишь, тут свет оттуда падает, подсвечивает, очень красиво. Ну давай. На стриме залить, чтобы потом лайки за что поставили. Разъебали. В очко. Это трилс. Пока с первого раза. Да, я не хочу никому звонить, брат. Какой сопи позвони, бля. А, ну, человек. Короче. Чего он накинул? Да, ближайшие. Все, Вась, сейчас будет очень интересно. Это у него. Тикток выложи. Не, я хочу в рил. Эксклюзив. Какой тикток? Да, и я потом второй рил смогу создать, понял? Я сейчас в этот сделаю. Не надо в этот, не надо. Не надо, брат, зачем? На контент оставь. Да, это оставь на второй рил.
Лео, клапан в Москву пришел.
Какого? О, да?
Да.
Когда оффер? Сейчас, пацаны, рил смотрите, выложим. Значит, опытно? Сейчас, так, в ТикТоке, в институт. А, ТикТока через... На следующий день через Wi-Fi. О, через ТикТок.
Wi-Fi?
Тут Wi-Fi есть, но у меня МТС работает.
Дай Ренату фильм посмотреть.
Блядь, ребят, фильм не включить, блядь.
Не знаю, что он не включает. Он фильм какой-то, лицо со шрамом смотрит, что такое.
Искренне смейтесь, искренне, блядь.
Что хочешь, блядь, ну не с парнями зашли, что такое? Что я говорю, да. Идиот. Куда? Ну куда? Куда? Я сделаю, ну подождите, не заходите сюда.
Бля, я охуел.
Только прям длинное не делай, блядь. Сука, на 2 минуты сделал ты?
Нет, у вас 5 секунд идет. Это волка или что это?
Выпей кофе.
Только купил мало.
Без.
Мало лишь.
А не спорт?
Я на видео видел, как эти арабы
Новое, да?
делают того.
Да вот первый день.
Да, смотри.
Оценка.
Не очень страшный даже.
Джан, пошла.
Это колеса стоковые на нее такие?
Да.
Ебать.
Блядь. Отдавай мне.
А салон не делаем?
Ну да, можно салон в конце чуть-чуть. Здравствуйте.
Здорово.
Все, и так заканчивается.
Реально?
Да.
Куда-то убираю? Ну тоже красиво.
Тоже красивый, красивый. А потом салон, заебись.
Лада W. Сэм уехал замирать на Е60 0 Нас Дмитрий сказал, ура! Наш старший брат запустил. Фильм будет смотреть.
Без суток, а вас очень высокомерно сидит, монтирует.
Я не хочу вас, нафиг нужно. Ты чё? Эта песня уже, блядь, заебала.
Выйди на улицу. Джен, найди мне снюс, пожалуйста.
Брат, курение зло, тебе всегда говорил.
Что это курение?
Никотин, а?
Да, с халвой как вкусно идет. Что в Дагестане видели, пацаны? Да, уже видел, что в Дагестане. Я не видел, брат. А вернее, то, что было, видел.
Машину заберем. Наберем, узнаем, что
Блондинчик, ну что такой симпотный. Девочка, что ты пишешь?
Что это за рожа такая хидная?
Девочка, что ты пишешь?
Дай бог, что пишет.
Что?
Счастье, здоровье.
А, это пацан написал.
Выложили?
Нет еще, вот он.
Тогда газ.
Да, базар нет.
Так оставить?
Да нет, да.
Верно?
Да можно вообще не. Да, убери это вообще.
Ну, смотри, просто тут видишь, бить так заканчивается. Ну, либо сейчас поменяешь.
Ты парень?
Тогда газ говорю.
Что, Женька, ничего не скажет?
Я думаю, так не. Может, просто вот такой конец сделать. Да?
Да, лучший идет. Да. Да.
Охуеть.
Заебись.
40 секунд.
Нормально?
Немного?
Нет.
Похуй, хотя бы меньше можно.
Так я ему написал.
Блять, тебя никто не спрашивает, заебал.
Сколько у меня тут рил шел, который залетел?
Да похуй, можно хотя бы столько. Феликс, или столько.
АФК пишет. Брат, ну что ты хочешь от нас?
Ты ж понял, ну типа
Ну, вообще, тебе не нравится с нами сидеть, не сиди, заебал.
Давай.
Держим тебя тут.
Не, очень бывает так. Брат, я даже если надо. Не, я знаю свою работу дальше.
Куда? Хле. Хле.
4 миллиона?
Да, я тебе говорю, он пиздец залетел, брат. Там 150 тысяч лайков.
Сколько секунд, как вот?
Хлестак.
25 секунд просто.
Хлестак.
30 секунд.
Хлестак.
Ебать воспоминания я смотрю.
Классно,
Очень
классно.
живой видос.
Да, этот трек на хапе был еще.
Эти уже по 5000 штук играли.
Точно тут 40 секунд? Ой, 25.
Ну это больше, да?
Да,
Да? То есть 15?
25.
25.
Подожди, вы же
Ну давай,
говорили,
вот так посмотрим на полном.
Давай, давайте посмотрим. Скажешь, да, нет, нет. Давай это.
Ровно 40 секунд.
Вот, давайте, открывай его. Я смотри, как смотрится, понял?
А ты что ставишь?
Так. Так. Так.
Золотой в кадр охуенно.
Да. Не, смотрится хорошо. Типа не заебывает видос. Не, нормально смотрится. Я типа ждал салон, потому что блин, я сейчас сидел как зритель, только думаю, бля, а салон покажите, понял?
Да, жопу тебе свою не показать, то есть тоже.
А чё, блядь, охуел, ты мне скинь телеграм, да, это оригинал, козел, ёбаный.
Стенки, давай видос.
А, да, блин, давай, блин.
У тебя на андроиде есть?
Бля, а ваш, бля, такого у меня рилсмейкера найти, как ты, блядь.
Бля, мне самому такого найти.
Клянусь, это сам идею придумал, понял? Бля, хуй так найти. А? Чё, поехали? Поехали? Поехали. Сейчас Ренат запустит. Не хочу в Анапу ездить.
А куда хочешь?
Хочу по городу кататься просто. Да, я сейчас пойду, позже тебя просто поставлю там, сзади. Пока что. Завтра потом отгоню ее.
Сейчас едем в это. А на что ты будешь ехать?
На Весте, братиш?
Сейчас в Хане едем.
Ой, Хани, блядь.
А мы в Ахтиравесту будем.
Не накрываешь ты себе поляну за Весту? Брат, за Весту,
Ну,
конечно.
что не хотят, я стою. Да, Поляна, пошли нахер.
За что это агрессия?
Слышите, блядь, богатый, блядь, лору на голове, блядь.
Брат, твое это
Сколько тебе занесли из АвтоВАЗа, ребят?
Бля, сука, ни копейки, бля. Мы бесплатно
Один
рекламу
кофе.
делаем, бля, АвтоВАЗа.
Я тоже бесплатно снимаю.
А что, выбора есть, что ли, блядь?
Меня вообще в роль звали.
Че не пошел?
Свое дело, брат.